What are some less known, darker facts about beloved countries? The Dutch once ate their prime minister. On Toronto's beaches up to the mid-1950s, it was common to see signs that read "No dogs or Jews allowed." Edit, not so much of a spoiler alert, blacks were also in that group. Scrolling through these comments feels like when your family thinks you're old enough they start letting you in on the dark family secrets. Bhutan forcibly expelled Hindus in order to create its happy paradise. Canada has an incredible racist history involving taking Aboriginal children from their homes and bringing them to residential schools where they were beaten, underfed, and forced never to speak their language. Many of them died. Ireland has to this day still not recovered population-wise from the British-imposed famine of the mid-19th century. In around 1910 the Australian government decided it was a good idea to steal Indigenous children from their mothers and send them to schools to be taught. Some of them never even saw their parents again. They were called the Stolen Generation. Canada is the biggest producer of asbestos in the world, although using the product is banned in the country. New Zealand, high rates of child abuse, hidden poverty and a housing crisis on the brink. Not enough housing and what there is extremely expensive to both rent and buy and rapidly rising at a ridiculous rate. It's also not particularly high quality. In Canada, there's a guy called Scott. He's a dick. Spain expelled the Jews in the 1490s. No Jewish children were born in Spain again until the 1960s. Norway used to suppress the natives from up north, by separating them from their parents and forcing Norwegian culture upon them. Learning Norwegian and how to live like a Norwegian. Sarawak ignores the natives called the Pennin. They still lives in the jungle and are basically a jungle nomad, but due to the timber industry making big bucks, the government and logging companies ignore them and destroyed close to or more than 50% of the rainforest. If you find information from the government they will say is not true and whatnot. Bruno Manser was an activist who fought for their rights and the perseverance of the rainforest, but he mysteriously disappeared. I think it was in the 90s, can't remember. Until today no one knows what happened to him. Conspiracy theories ranged from him hiding or lost in the jungle to the government assassinated him. Don't ask Germany how it got those borders. For all the weeaboos out there, look up Unit 731. In Canada the police would frequently take native men for midnight tours or starlight drives where they would drive them miles out of town and kick them out of the car. This happened in the middle of winter and they would take their coats and oftentimes boots as well before they kicked them out. In parts of Colombia it's tradition to have sexual relations with female donkeys as a way of practicing safe sex before marriage. In Argentina, the right-wing government took the babies of pregnant left-wing prisoners and adopted them into military families during the Dirty War. During World War II Canada turned away fleeing Jews, Romanians, and Gypsies seeking asylum from the horrors of the Nazi Party. They didn't believe their claims of what was happening until near the end of the war when the camps were discovered. Not sure if beloved as much as pitied, but I'll chime in about Haiti. They won their independence from French colonists in 1804, which was incredible and proud. But after the war Dessalines committed a genocide against white residents. Upon his death, there were tensions between the blacks and the mulat class, and the country was divided between Henri Christophe in the north with the support of most blacks, and Alexandre Pétion in the south with the mulats and gens de couleur, men of color equals people who were freedmen pre-revolution. Christophe established an autocratic kingdom in an unpaid feudal plantation system, near to slavery albeit with less cruelty, to try and export sugar for profit, while Pétion went from democratic rule to eventually abolishing the legislature. The country would be reunited in 1820 by Boyer, only for him to conquer the future Dominican Republic, which Haiti would hold until 1844. Fun facts to balance that out. Haiti was the first country to recognize Greek independence against the Ottomans. Haiti gave Simon Bolivar sanctuary, after which he was able to rebel against Spain to create Gran Colombia. Evidently everyone was a dick to their natives. Here in Colombia we have enough material to have a dedicated post, but for mentioning one. In 1928, a banana company workers ceased their production and got in protests. They wanted better work conditions because they worked a lot for the crap of payment they got. The government's response was send the National Army to shoot a place where between 2,000 and 4,000 people were sleeping or relaxing. Officially 13 people died, but the people there told that number was faked and the death counter was a lot higher. France had concentration camps. In 1936 for Spanish immigrants who fled the Civil War. In some states in the U.S. child brides are legal. There's over 200 child brides, some of them being like 13 years old. A whole lot of rape, murder and deception. That's every country though. Not beloved by many, I admit, but the UK started a war to force China to buy opium from them. Invented concentration camps. In Kenya, after World War II, used concentration camps, killed tens of thousands, raped, tortured, etc. and then destroyed as much of the evidence they could. Made a big fuss of outlawing slavery but paid so much in compensation to slavers the associated debt was only paid off in the 1980s. Exported homophobia around the world, so that a number of countries now have the death penalty for something they really thought was fine before colonization, and now sneer at those countries unironically. One of the massacres of Muslims they perpetrated was intensified by soldiers coating the bullets in pig fat. Caused a major famine in India by diverting much-needed crops to feed already well-fed Europeans, the leader at the time having a well-known hatred of Indians. Allowed a great famine to kill over 1 million Irish people because famine was seen as a natural form of population control. Etc., etc. Not enough people know about the Islamic Revolution in Iran, emo. More pitied than beloved nowadays, but it was a nice and rather free country before, especially for women. They were able to vote, were encouraged to get education, women and men mixed freely, and even 6 women were elected in parliament prior to it. Mosquitoes in Brazil can literally kill you from 1 out of 5 illness. Belgium is a pretty chill place, post-Leopold II. Germany went through a period where they did a bunch of racist shit in the 1930s and early 1940s. During World War I, Poles were drafted by both sides with the promise that upon victory their nation would be restored from the partition that had destroyed it decades earlier. Hundreds of thousands of Poles killed each other trying to free their homeland. Japanese army raped women from South Korea and China. I recommend you to see the documentary. Anyway, they raped the women at a ratio of 70 men to single women. If women get pregnant, they either kill the baby because if babies might rebel against Japanese army. In the center of the capital of my country there is a Lenin's palace that Stalin built. Now it is called the Palace of Science and Culture. If you've ever looked at a country like Liechtenstein on a map and wondered how a country that small can maintain a flourishing economy, the answer is that they're one of the largest offshore banking sites in the world. Most people only think of the Cayman Islands when it comes to offshore banking, but the Cayman Islands aren't even close to being the only place where rich people stash their money to avoid paying taxes on it. Most of the places that do it are territories and not countries. The Cook Islands, Anguilla, Jersey and Guernsey are a few other big offshore banking sites, but Liechtenstein has made it the core of their economy. New Zealand has crippling mental health, poverty and housing issues which many gloss over because Jacinda Ardern exists. Sweden was partially responsible for why Jews had to stamp a J in their passports. Also, they tried very hard to eradicate the cultures of the indigenous people of Lapland by forcing their children to attend Swedish schools and to abandon their customs. The Swedish Social Democratic Party established the State Institute for Racial Biology that studied genetic differences between races and how to refine the racial traits in the Swedish population by avoiding race mixing between Swedes and the Sami people, Jews, and Romani people. Between 1906 and 1975, Sweden conducted forced sterilizations on people they saw unfit to have children, such as transsexuals, homosexuals, allegedly promiscuous people, Romani people, alcoholics, or people with mental illnesses. Deleted. I'm just scrolling through looking for people talking about Ireland. Hi, German here, and I've just Googled to see if there's anything I can add about our beloved country, and you will not believe some of the shit I've just found out. Deleted. The Kingdom of Hawaii, long before they were a state, was illegally overthrown by the US government in the late 19th century. Since then, Hawaii has only gotten a single apology from Bill Clinton 100 years later. In Egypt, sexual harassment is like the air, everywhere. Something every woman must live with. The partition riots in India, the British finally withdrew, Pakistan and India's partition lines were created, and up to 4 million people died in warfare. The White Australia policy. Up until a few decades ago, the Australian government was actively trying to wipe out its entire Aboriginal population by stealing children from their parents and giving them to white families where they would eventually breed with white people and the country would eventually have a fully white population. Aboriginal people also weren't legally considered humans in Australia until the 1960s. Australia has somehow been able to convince the world that it's a laid-back, happy country despite having one of the most oppressed minority populations in the entire world. During World War II, the Swiss National Bank accepted large quantities of gold from the German Reichsbank as payment for Swiss export shipments, weapons, ammunition, A large part of this Reichsbank gold had either been looted by the German occupying forces from the stocks of the occupied countries, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, etc., or it came from the victims of the Nazi persecution of the Jews, Holocaust /. Apart from the long list of things done to our indigenous population, Australia had a practice in place called blackbirding, which was effectively slaving in the South Pacific. In France, the last time a guillotine was used for execution, the first Star Wars was in theaters. Mongolia wiped nearly 11% of the entire world population off the face of the planet. The largest acts of mass killing/genocide in human history. It literally changed our carbon footprint by an estimated 700 million tons of carbon in the atmosphere during the 13th century. Japan. There are restaurants who have official policies to legally refuse to serve non-Japanese patrons. Germany's efficiency is blocked by ignoring digitalization for many years. Our political system is corrupt as hell, and even though we have a social system with healthcare, the gap between rich and poor is getting bigger and bigger. It gets fucked up more and more every year, but for some reason all people that I meet when traveling think that we Germans living in a country full of efficient and happy workers. That everything you love was built off the assumed worthless class of people who are expected to just be okay with it. Canada is pretty dark between November to March. Winter and all you know. Finns killed 3% of their own population in concentration camps after civil war in 1918. We also sent Jews to Germany during World War II and still are one of the most racist nations in Europe. Edit, we also actively participated to siege of Leningrad, which led to 1 million civilian deaths. Croatia was really close to Germany in World War II and had their own concentration camps just for Serbs, and sometimes only for Serbian children. The reason that Ireland is the land of the potatoes and the potatoes are staple crop is because many centuries ago the British owned the land and forced the Irish to work, and they were left with small plots of land. The potato is one of the best crops for how much it can grow in a small space, especially considering the climate of Ireland. So potatoes being part of Irish culture is because it was the only plant they wouldn't starve with. Spain created over 50 new torture methods in the past 300 years. If you were born when the United States of America was founded, and only aged when they were not at war, you would not be old enough to run for U.S. president. The USA has, functionally, always been at war. New Zealand has one of the highest youth suicide rates in the OECD. Netherlands slaved the shit out of Africans. And the Belgium did some shit in Africa that would make Joseph Mengele go, "Whoa, calm down buddy." During World War II, Japan used living POWs for bayonet practice. Thank you guys for watching. I really hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. See you soon.